You can support us by subscribing. We are in a period when Russian losses increased the most throughout the war. The difficult conditions in the Russian positions are increasing every day. Soldiers in the Russian forces are devastated while trying to focus on the war. However, they are not successful at all in this regard, and they cannot be successful in either attack or defense organizations. All Russian soldiers think about is getting out of this war. Russian soldiers do not have many options to survive the war. So what do Russian soldiers have to do to save their lives, and who will save them? Ukraine extended its hand to the Russian soldiers on this issue many times, and these attempts by Kiev began to yield results. The Russians, ready to surrender, show great interest in the I Want to Live project. As a result of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's calls for Russian soldiers to surrender, a total of 9,836 soldiers applied from the barracks in the Russian Federation, or from the temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine. So, with what methods are thousands of soldiers surrendering to the Ukrainian army? What are the Russians doing to avoid being caught by their commander? Let's solve this puzzle together. The surrender process of Russian soldiers was also very risky for the Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian authorities who developed the project followed an innovative way to find a solution to this risk. Ukrainian forces received the greatest support from UAVs throughout the war. In both offensive and reconnaissance missions, UAVs under the control of Ukrainian forces have accomplished great things. Now, a new one has been added to the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Task Pool. The Ukrainian military has launched a program to use drones in an unexpected role. This program is part of the I Want to Live project. A Russian soldier throws his gun to the ground, raises his hands and nervously follows a path marked by a drone that will lead him to the 54th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. After the start of the surrender program to drones, the Ukrainian General Staff released a training video explaining how Russian soldiers can surrender to a Ukrainian drone. The project is part of Ukraine's far-reaching effort to persuade Russian soldiers to give up. The project I Want to Live includes a hotline, a website, and a social communication channel dedicated to communicating with Russian soldiers and their families. It is not fully foreseen how much unmanned aerial vehicles will support this meaningful project. It is too early to say anything definitive on this issue. Without drones, Ukrainian soldiers would meet the Russians who wanted to surrender. Since this process will take place at a point close to the front, Ukrainian soldiers will be at great risk. Thanks to drones, this risk has disappeared. The surrender process is progressing very well. However, there was a big question mark in the minds of the Russian soldiers, who were mobilized and did not want to fight. According to a decree signed by Russian leader Vladimir Putin, those who are against war and do not want to fight will be sentenced to up to 15 years in prison. This decree frightened many Russian soldiers. Also, the soldiers were concerned about their families who were in Russia. On this issue, the Ukrainian authorities reassured the Russian soldiers. The Ukrainians stated that they would not explain how the surrendered Russian soldiers surrendered. All surrendered Russian soldiers will be recorded as captured on the battlefield. In addition, the Kiev government has made many commitments to the Russian soldiers who will surrender. The coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war assured that the Russian soldiers would be treated in accordance with the terms of the Geneva Agreement. Surrendered Russian soldiers will be able to receive assistance and legal support from other international organizations, monitoring the conditions of stay of prisoners of war by the International Committee of the Red Cross. The Russian soldiers sent to Ukraine as part of the mobilization cannot meet even their basic needs. You may recall that some Russian soldiers in Ukraine mentioned that they have the right to eat only one meal a day. At the same time, Russian soldiers are not allowed to meet with their families. Because of this, many rebellions occurred. The Kiev government provides the surrendering Russian soldiers with 3 meals a day, medical care, and regular contact with relatives. The situation of the Russians staying in the Ukrainian camps is shared with the public in a transparent manner. Some media outlets were allowed to visit the camps. In addition, the International Committee of the Red Cross organizes routine visits. The Russian soldiers who manage to survive despite the difficult conditions in Ukraine surrender and begin to live in humanitarian conditions. After their surrender, the Russian soldiers have 2 options. The first of these is to voluntarily exchange with military personnel of the Ukrainian armed forces in captivity in the Russian Federation and return to Russia. The other is the opportunity to apply for asylum in Ukraine or other European countries. The choice is left entirely to the Russian soldiers. By the way, it's worth mentioning, he also gave e-cards containing information on how to surrender to the Russian soldiers, released as part of the Ukrainians' exchange of prisoners of war. In this way, The Russian soldiers who have to return to the war know how to surrender themselves again. About the soldiers who return to Russia after the surrender, the Kremlin government will not know anything about how they were captured. Even if it is difficult, they can continue with their lives, but with an asylum application, they can have a perfect life from scratch. The Ukrainian authorities have mobilized all the means at their disposal for the success of this campaign. Both high-tech and low-tech communication tools were used in Ukraine's announcement of this project to the Russians. Artillery units routinely used multiple rocket launch systems to fire shells, each filled with 1,500 leaflets at Russian positions. At the same time, SMS messages were sent to Russian phones telling them to lay down their weapons. So what kind of path did Ukraine follow to develop this project? The Russian Federal Service for Communications, Information Technology and Mass Media Supervision is the body that carries out all censorship within Russia. It's abbreviated as Roskomnadzor. The project went into effect 6 months ago. The Ukrainian president made many calls and introduced the project to the Russian people. From the moment the project came into effect, Roskomnadzor regularly tries to block access to it. Despite all the efforts by Roskomnadzor, more than 14 million people from the territory of Russia visited the I Want to Live project website. Applications are not only made by Russian soldiers. At the same time, the relatives and loved ones of the soldiers who were drafted into the army can apply for them. This is because the mobilized Russians did not have access to the internet or mobile communications when they arrived in Ukraine. I Want to Live, aka Hocho Zit, is a government project designed to help Russian military personnel surrender safely. The project receives more than 100 calls every day. In the project with great demand, the Ukrainian authorities even added a chatbot to its website to meet this demand. However, the demand is increasing every day. The biggest factor in the increasing interest in the project is the increasing casualties of the Russian forces recently. Over the past 2 months, Russian forces have lost as much as a third of the number of soldiers they lost. Russia has recruited many Russian citizens without military experience. The mobilized Russian citizens were deployed to the fronts in Ukraine without adequate training. The increase in the number of casualties frightened these soldiers and prompted them to seek a solution that could save their lives. Ukrainian Defense Ministry Defense Intelligence spokesman Andriy Yusov stated in December that 1,200,000 applications were received for the project. These calls were not a demand for surrender, but the families of the mobilized soldiers learned how they could save the lives of their loved ones. Looking at the current demand, we can clearly see how the mobilized Russian soldiers are affected by the increasing casualties. The fact that Russian soldiers want to live and not participate in war campaigns has a really nice effect. The Ukrainian government is making great efforts to keep the Russians who were forcibly sent to this brutal war alive. If the number of surrendered Russian soldiers goes at this rate, the Russian positions may be emptied in a short time. This will not please the Kremlin. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Our contents are carefully prepared by our expert team. This content belongs only to Oracle Eye's YouTube channel. We will take legal action against all channels, social media platforms and websites which use our content without permission. Thank you for watching us.